Hello, welcome back to Gardener's World. We've been away for a few weeks, but here at Longmeadow, the garden has been growing and I think flourishing. It's been a lovely summer so far. We've had good weather and the plants, from vegetables through to trees and all the flowers in the borders, have been really healthy. Now, of course, there have been changes. Some things have flowered and gone over, other things are coming to their very best. And there's quite a lot we can do at this time of year to make sure that that display looks as good as it can right through into autumn. Now, tonight's programme is full of my favourite things. Carol is celebrating one of our most dramatic wildflowers, along with its cultivated cousins.
Surely everybody recognises a foxglove. Every child who sees one of these plants wants to stick their fingers inside those bells and make their own gloves.
Joe finds out what the world-famous garden designer Dan Pearson has planned for his own new garden.
It's not really about grand designs, imposing yourself on the landscape, is it?
No, it's about finding this meeting point between the ornamental garden, which I'm going to make, and this naturalistic space.
I shall be revealing a brand new area here at Longmeadow. But first, I'm going to continue a job, in fact, which I've been doing for the last week or so, which is really important at this time of year, to extend the flowering season in our borders. Now, the border at this time of year is full of plants that have actually done their stuff. And what they're concentrating on is setting seed so that next year they can look really good. And for example, these alliums, Purple Sensation, which looks stunning in May and early June, are now setting seed. Now, if I wanted them to spread, I'd leave them, because that seed will develop new plants. But we've got too many alliums. So one of the things I'm doing is pulling them up. And they do just pull out really easily. You just gently pull on them, and that clears them. That won't harm the bulb, which will grow again next year, but it will stop them setting seed. So it'll also create some space, because the dual garden is planted so intensively you can't even get a foot in half the time. And when you come to plants like the perennial geraniums, the hardy geraniums here, these are still flowering, and there is a temptation to keep them going as long as there are any flowers, but don't. Because if you look, there are very few flowers on each stem, and these are all setting seed. So if I cut that back hard, I'll get a flush of regrowth, and with it, much more intense ratio of flower to plant. Now, this applies to all the early flowering perennials. So you've got hardy geraniums, you've got oriental poppies, delphiniums when they're over. Cut them all back to the ground. And you should get a repeat flowering in August and September. The other thing is how much space is created. So it's not just about making existing plants grow back strongly, but also creating room to put in new plants. And at this time of year, the plants I want to put in are the tender ones. Zinnias, cosmos, all of which can now be planted into this space that I've created. So they will grow alongside the resurgence and regrowth of the earlier perennials. And that way, we get a really rich tapestry of colour. No other plant has given me more pleasure over the last week or so than this foxglove. It's self-sown, a weed, if you like, in the cracks in the paving. And look, it's grown enormous. It's taller than the shed and has just been filled with flower. And I regard these kinds of things as a glorious gift. I take no credit for it at all. And Carol is also celebrating the foxglove, but looking at the kinds that you can cultivate in your garden.
Surely everybody recognises a foxglove when they see one. These tall stems loaded with bells just announce its presence to all of us, and more importantly, to pollinating insects. And once those insects arrive, they're guided in by these wonderful dots and spots within. Its common name, foxglove, denotes its connections with mankind. Every child who sees one of these plants wants to stick their fingers inside those bells and make their own gloves. Its Latin name, Digitalis purpurea, tells you a lot about the plant too. Digit, like finger, and purpurea, this brilliant, magnificent colour. It's typical of a woodland plant in that the bells are all concentrated on one side, so it's searching for the light. And the structure is so beautifully and perfectly evolved. No one flower obscures the entrance to any of the other bells down here. Now, lots of us grow Digitalis purpurea in our own gardens, but they're just the start of the story. In the middle of the Wiltshire countryside, there's a nursery that I've always wanted to explore. I've met its owner many times at flower shows up and down the country, but this is the first time I've visited here. This place holds one of the national collections of foxgloves, and I can't wait to take a closer look. I don't think I've ever been to a nursery like this. You just feel as though you're in the middle of the countryside.
Yeah, well, we are. This is the most southerly outpost of the Cotswolds. And the wildlife has moved in. We've got a whole population of hedgehogs and rabbits and all sorts of things. And we live and let live, pretty much.
I always had you down as a shrub man.
Yeah.
Initially.
Yeah, woody plants. And that's really why the foxglove sort of came into it, because what grows better with shrubs than foxgloves?
Yeah. I think this is typical of the sort of things that are all around your nursery. This lovely big mound of euphorbia. Which one is it?
This is Stygiana, and it's got this marvellous honey scent.
I wish everybody could smell it.
Isn't it
It's
fantastic?
so gorgeous. And punctuated by, is this Mertenensis?
That's Mertenensis.
Yeah. I mean, this is just one of how many foxgloves that you grow.
Well, here we've got about 35 different named sorts.
And is there any call for straightforward Digitalis purpurea?
Oh, it's an absolute essential. Yeah. And it's got all the refined elegance of the wild plant.
What a great idea, putting them all in a line so you can really see, can't you?
We have a thing called Foxglove Week, and all the digiologists in the country come and compare one foxglove with another.
Digiologists!
But they come to compare one foxglove with another, and this seems the most efficient way of doing it. So they're all different forms, all different subtly from one another.
That's quite different, though, isn't it?
Well, that's Candy Mountain, and here the flowers are all pointing upwards.
Essentially, they're edge of woodland or hedgerow plants, aren't they?
They are indeed, yeah. They like that sort of humusy layer that you tend to get. And in the garden, we can replicate that by using whatever humus or garden compost we've got, just to create a nice moist layer on the surface of the soil.
I love the way that in white foxgloves, there's no trace of a purple, is there, in the stems, on the leaves, anything at all?
If you want to create a sort of mini Sissinghurst in your garden, then...
What, the white garden?
The white garden. Yeah. Then you can do that in your own home garden. And the best way to do it is just to look through your seedlings and see how they're colouring up. I've got a couple here, which I was going to put in a bit later. And you see this one, no marking of purple on there at all. So that's going to go in with the white group. That's just a purple foxglove, and that'll go in the garden.
It's plain to see, isn't it? And I'll tell you what, I've always felt that white foxgloves have softer leaves too. Digitalis purpurea are mainly biennial, and they're essentially plants of northern Europe. But there are so many perennial foxgloves that can really grace our gardens and do things that Digitalis purpurea just can't do. Things like Digitalis lutea. Look at that with these tiny, dainty bells. Or this one. This is parviflora. Most of these perennial foxgloves are evergreen. Where they come from, they grow on the edge of woodland, but when you bring them into a British garden, you can put them out in full sun. Is this a shrub or is this a foxglove? In actual fact, it's both. This is Digitalis canariensis from high up in the mountains on the Canary Islands, where it's developed not only evergreen leaves, which withstand Atlantic gales, but also this shrubby growth. It's got no reason to die back down to the ground in the winter. Now, there are other ways of adapting to those sort of fierce conditions. It's Digitalis haywoodii, and it comes from Portugal, and it's got an entirely different way of coping with a hot, dry situation. In this case, its leaves are covered in this fine fur, and it stops the leaves losing moisture. So, whether you want to create somewhere that reminds you of your Mediterranean holidays, or you want to recreate a woodland glade, there's a foxglove for you.
Earlier on, I said that everything had grown really well and was healthy. Well, it's not quite true, because my garlic has got leek rust. And you can see these orange pustules. It's a fungus, and it affects the leaves, and eventually they die back. Now, it's not a disaster, but it does mean that it's over for that garlic. They need harvesting now because it's not going to get any better. And the bulb won't grow anymore if the leaves are dying back. But the really interesting thing is not the fact that it's got rust, but it's so variable from variety to variety. So Valdeado, which I've got here, is hit really badly, but the elephant garlic hasn't been touched, right next to it. And on the other side, we've got Germidor, which has been hit badly, just a foot away from Cristo, which is not too bad.
It's thought that different strains of the fungus exist, so it's worth trying different varieties of garlic to see which is most resistant in your garden.
Now, I'm going to have to clear the ground later on, but I just want to try one because it may well be that they're ready for harvest anyway. So if I take that up, and these were planted in October, you can see that we've got a small bulb, but perfectly edible. I love the smell of garlic. I love the smell, the taste, I love the health aspect of it. I never understand why people don't like it. Nigel, do you like garlic? Nige, how about that? Does that smell good? Sort of. Good boy. We'll harvest those later. In fact, I didn't come up here to look at my garlic. I came up to see how my potatoes were going on. Now, you remember that I did a trial. These are Charlotte potatoes, second earlies, which can be treated as first earlies, which I've grown here in the soil, ridged up, earthed up, grown very conventionally. And I've also grown them in a raised bed, very close together, and I haven't earthed those up, I haven't done anything to them at all. And the point being is, if the raised bed ones create as good a harvest as the conventional grown ones, then that's how I'm going to do them in future, because it's really easy. Now, you don't harvest potatoes of any kind until they flower. That when you see them flowering, that's an indication that they're forming tubers. So obviously, if they just begin to flower, they'll only just be forming tubers. But if you want big baking potatoes or you want maximum harvest, wait till the flowering is finished or is finishing, and then you can harvest them. Okay, make sure we don't damage them too much. The ground is quite dry. Let's pull that up. Let's see, look at that. Now, these are less than 3 months old. That's less than 90 days. And here we go. That is not bad, is it? So this is 2 plants. Now, I would stress that if I left these for another week or so, each individual tuber would be bigger. But that's a good starter. So let's see how they got on in the raised bed. Well, let's pull out the tops. One. They seem to be a bit smaller, first impression, which is what you would expect because they've got less room. Okay, I think that's the lot for there, so let's compare the two. Now, on the evidence of these first plants, and it is early days, you can't really draw conclusions until you've checked them all, There's a very nice harvest from the conventional method, and the tubers are good and big. But there are more potatoes in the raised bed, and they're a good size if you're eating them as new potatoes. But certainly it's much less work growing them in a raised bed. You literally just make a hole and pop them in, and grow them in a grid, and that's it. Do nothing else to them at all. So I would definitely suggest, if you've got good raised beds, grow new potatoes in them and save your open ground for main crop. Now, we can't harvest potatoes without doing one special thing. Nigel, potato trick time, Nigel. Sit. This is a very beautiful thing. By the way, you shouldn't give dogs raw potatoes, but... Go on. Good boy. Don't eat it. Don't eat it. There's a good boy. There's a good boy. Right, you may not have potatoes. You may not have a dog that catches them off his nose, but here are some jobs you can be doing this weekend. Good boy. Good boy. If you grow cordon tomatoes, you'll notice that side shoots form between the stem and the leaf. These grow at 45 degrees very vigorously. And if you leave them, you'll get a tangled mess and not many extra tomatoes. Pinch them out when they're young. If you do the job in the morning, you can use your fingers and snap them off because they're turgid and full of liquid. If you try and snap them later in the day, often they'll tear the stem. So good idea to use secateurs or a knife. If you have a greenhouse or conservatory, you'll do much more harm by letting it get too hot and dry than by keeping it well ventilated and moist. Open all the doors and windows and water the floors as well as the plants. And apart from keeping the atmosphere cool and moist, which is healthy, it'll also keep problems like red spider mite at bay. To keep your roses flowering as long as possible, it's important to deadhead them regularly, and this is particularly true of all repeat flowering roses. Don't just pull the petals off, but prune them back to the first leaf bud, even if this means taking off quite a lot of stem. This in turn will promote fresh growth, and with it will come fresh flower buds. By deadheading this particular rose regularly, it goes on flowering right into autumn. One word of caution, if you're growing roses that have really good hips, and Rosa Moisei, for example, is a really good example of that, don't deadhead those flowers because you'll be cutting off the hips. Now, about the time that we started to make this garden, some 23 years ago, I was introduced to a brilliant young garden designer. His name was Dan Pearson, and he's since gone on to become one of the leading designers in the world. He's been London-based during most of that time, but a couple of years ago, he bought a place in the country and started to make a garden for himself. And a few weeks ago, Joe went down to Somerset to see how he's getting on.
It took 10 years to find, but finally Dan Pearson has a landscape of his own to transform. And it's a real challenge, 20 acres of rolling countryside. As a designer, Dan's created all kinds of gardens, from an urban oasis for cancer sufferers to his work at the Millennium Forest in Japan, a space that aims to delight and surprise for 1,000 years. Oh, a lovely cup of coffee. Thanks, Dan. This is such a beautiful spot.
No, it's wonderful, isn't it? It's the reason we came. And having gardened in London for years, suddenly you've got no boundaries. Your horizon is different. You think completely differently through having space around you and just gardening context with somewhere rather than within a box. I've planted an orchard and a nursery, and I did that straight away so that that's going to be growing up for the future.
So you're just feeling your way.
I'm feeling my
it's a
way.
very slow burner, right? You're in absolutely no rush.
No, that's a really good way of putting it.
At the front of his house are some of his favourite plants. This is lovely as well. This is lovely.
This is sort of starting to get together a palette of things which might look nice together. There's the bronze fennel.
Yeah.
There's this really beautiful Anothera sulphurea, and I just thought it would be a beautiful thing to start naturalising here in the drier places. This is a wild barley, which I brought back from Greece as seed, and I think it's a perennial one. And I want there to be plants that grow in the plantings here that make it look like it could be a garden that was here many, many centuries ago.
So almost if it's self-seeded from the fields?
From the fields into here. I've always gardened on the sort of naturalistic side, and I'm wanting to sort of push it a bit further this time.
At the side of his house, he's developing a trial garden to see what plants will thrive here. Oh, wow! This looks like fun.
It is an enormous amount of fun.
So this is your Noah's Ark of plants,
Absolutely.
really? This
Well, I've got-
poppy...
Isn't it beautiful?
It is beautiful.
This is an opium poppy that I found when I was 19, down in Hampshire. I was just on a cycle ride, and I sent a little letter to the person in the house saying, please, can I have some seed? And they wrote back saying, please, come back and help yourself.
The scale of Dan's ambition is truly impressive. He's got so much space to play with.
I've started using some of the garden plants which I'm growing here, which are man enough to deal with it, amongst the natural vegetation here, so I get that kind of slightly heightened, naturalistic look.
Are you trying to create surprises here that you wouldn't expect to see in the natural landscape to a degree?
Absolutely. I don't want to be able to see that there's anything ornamental going on here from a distance, but I want to discover it when I get down here. You'll suddenly see that it's Iris gel derby with, you know, the dark stems and that amazing blue flower, or there'll be a giant meadow sweet from Japan, which is, you know, 3 times the size in terms of its leaves.
But they've got to be able to battle it out in there.
They have.
It's survival of the fittest, isn't it?
It is, totally. And this is part of the big experiment.
And on a site this big, there's plenty of room to encourage wildflowers.
So I'm experimenting with some old pasture that I've overseeded with yellow rattle, because it's a semi-parasite, it's an annual, and it weakens the grass, which then allows this window of opportunity for the wildflowers which are growing amongst it to take a hold. My ultimate aim with this is to get orchids self-seeding in, which are in other meadows nearby. And if I can get the orchids in here, I'll start to feel like I'm really achieving something. It's about finding this meeting point between the ornamental garden, which I'm going to make, and this naturalistic space. So the wild places come right up as close as they can to the ornamental garden. Gardening is a fascinating process, and really it's not the end result. It's being in it and doing it that is the thing that really makes me tick. So I'm very happy for this to run, you know, another 30 years.
I really like the way that Dan is allowing the garden to evolve, and he doesn't know where it's going to go, he doesn't know how long it's going to take, but enjoying the process. That's what we've done here at Longmeadow over the last 23-odd years. But no change has been bigger than here at the mound. Now, over the years, this is just a pile of soil that's built up from paths and ponds and building work, and with quite a lot of rubble underneath too. And for the last few months, behind the scenes, we've been transforming this into a new garden in its own right. So it's got a fire pit where we can have our bonfires, but also sit round a fire on a winter's night. Fabulous view over the countryside. What will be a meadow on top, borders down below on a lower terrace, and then steep banks which we'll plant up. And all the plants here, whether they be hedges, shrubs, wildflowers, herbaceous perennials, will be native. And this is the perfect site because you've got the fabulous view out into the countryside, and it means that you have plants that blend and drift out into the landscape. And the final thing that I love about native plants is they are the best way of attracting insects into your garden. And the more insects you have in the garden, the healthier it will be. The real planting, the flower planting, begins here on what will be a wildflower meadow. When you're preparing any area of meadow, you still need to dig it over as though you were preparing a border. So this has been dug, it's been raked once, and I'm just raking it again to get the worst of the stones. Now, what I'm after here is long grass absolutely packed with wildflowers. And you can buy all that. If you tell the supplier, and with the days of the internet, it's dead easy, whether it's chalky soil, whether it's heavy clay, sunny, shady, whatever, they will supply you with a mix that fits that set of circumstances. Now, it's really important to follow the instructions, and particularly not to sow the seed too thickly. This is recommended to be sown at about 4 grams per square metre. We've got roughly 20 square metres there. So that's about 80 grams. Now, 80 grams looks something like that. And a tip to make it easier is then to add about 9 times as much sand. Like that. And then mix it up thoroughly. I'll be able to see where I've sown. And if the sand is spread evenly, then so is the seed. It will seem scary if you haven't done this before. You won't believe that it will make a really decent display of flowers and grass, but believe you me, it will. Now, if you're very particular, you can divide the area up into metre squares using bamboos or string, but I prefer to just do it by eye. Now, this seed does not want to be buried. It wants to lie pretty much on the surface of the soil. So just rake it lightly to make sure that it's spread evenly. Now, what I'm holding in my head while I'm doing this is that this is going to be a tall, beautiful, wispy, colourful meadow. A flowering meadow is about as lovely as any border could ever aspire to be. And that's what you're making from this unlikely beginning. This time next year, I think this will just be looking stunning. Now, the next stage, and the final one, is to firm the seed into the soil. So I'm going to use my feet and just tread it gently. Contact with the soil is really important to ensure good germination. So this is not about levelling the soil at all. It's all about pushing the seed tight up against the ground. And if you've got a roller, of course, that would do the job perfectly well. It is really important to keep your seeds watered every day. And keep on watering it until it's properly germinated and is growing strongly. You don't have to sluice it down, just a fine mist will do, but just keep it moist. Don't let it dry out. Now, we shall be back at the normal time next week. See you then. Bye-bye.